And I'll share a couple ideas with you, but I'm sure you may have some other ones that are equally worthy exploring. One is agriculture. Agriculture in this province hasn't changed really fundamentally over the last 100 years. So machines got fancier, farms got bigger, but at the end of the day, we're still producing the same products and exporting them in the same state, being raw agricultural products. And the fact is that when you actually go to Safeway and you pick up a box of Kellogg's cornflakes, it's Kellogg's cornflakes that really lend themselves well to Alberta, you'll pay somewhere around $6, I imagine. And if you bring that box home and you tear it apart, you will find that there is less than a penny worth of corn in it, which could be from Tabor. There's less than a penny worth of cardboard in it, which could be from Edson, Hinton, Grand Prairie area. And there's less than a penny of plastic in it, that liner bag, which could be from Fort McMurray, Fort Saskatchewan. If we were so lucky, and all these products were sourced out of Alberta, we would have made less than 3 pennies. Somebody is making $4.97. Very little of that is being done in Alberta, and very little of that is being done in Canada. So using the oil terminology, we do very little upgrading and refining of our agricultural products in this province. And why agriculture? Well, because at this point in time, all agrologists throughout the world agree that Canada will be either one of 5 or 7 countries within the next 20 years that will be exporting and producing surplus food. All the other nations in the world will be importing food because they simply don't grow enough of their own to feed their own population. And that is happening at a time where middle classes are rising in Southeast Asia, China, and other part of the Asian continent, who now want to consume better, more diverse, more upgraded, more refined food. Most of that production in the world will be happening right here in this country and more concisely on the prairies in the north-central United States. So we have to ask ourselves a question right now. Are we going to continue to export raw resources, frozen beef, corn, wheat, lentils, and other raw products, or are we going to upgrade them and refine them over here? Some of it is taking place. Potato growers have taken some initiatives to upgrade potatoes in this province, but overall it's very limited. The second industry that really lends itself to diversification of our economy is actually our research, development, and commercialization. We know that in Alberta, our economy will never grow on the strength of our muscles. We don't have the population base, and our labor is expensive. And we do not want to get into competition in labor with Asia and other Southeast Asian countries because simply we're not competitive. We don't want our wages to be competitive with the wages of those parts of the world. Our strength is our brains. And we know that we can grow a very strong economy in this province and in this country based on knowledge, on knowledge-based economies. And one of those knowledge-based economies actually is bioresearch. If you ever have the opportunity to either tune into or go to Boston or Chicago, where all the bio companies meet once a year at the bio conference, and those are pharmaceutical companies, medical equipment production companies, and medical protocol, healing protocol development companies, they know of Alberta. And oddly enough, I was quite pleasantly shocked. They know Alberta very well. They talk about Alberta. Why? Well, for a number of reasons. A, they like our population. 4, 5, 6 million people is just this type of population that you want to invest into to do your protocols and your studies within. But what they particularly like about our population is that because we are so genetically diverse, if you're going to commercialize your products worldwide, this is the population where you want to develop your products. And look at us, we are the Noah's Ark. We have 2 of everything in this province. But what makes us also very attractive is the quality of our post-secondary institutions and our research capacity. U of C, U of A, Lethbridge University, and NAIT and SAIT, they are at world class when it comes to academia and their research capacity. And that is a very important research backbone that they would like to partner with. But most importantly, and that's why I am so passionate and differ with my colleagues who run against me in this leadership race, relevant to diversifying Alberta Health Services, what the research community sees as a primary asset in Alberta, which is not replicated anywhere else in the world, is the fact that for this very unique population, we have a single-payer healthcare system, one database. If you were to find this kind of population anywhere else in the world, you'd be dealing with 5, 10, 15 different insurance companies, each collecting information, each tabulating information differently, useless for research. this is the place where you can get very reliable data on many population specimens. Those are just two of my ideas. You may have some additional ones, but the fact is we have to make that decision whether if we want to grow our economy moving forward, if we want to create high-tech, well-paying jobs for our children and grandchildren in this province that aren't necessarily tied only and exclusively to the oil and gas industry. If we want to slow down the urbanization of our province and actually create some of those high-tech positions in rural Alberta and suburban Alberta, and not necessarily just in urban Alberta. Those are questions that I'm putting forward, and I know that we have to make those decisions in a very short term. How do we do it? Well, we borrow a page from my Austria. That's how oil sands were developed. Premier Lockheed and the private sector did realize that if you create a climate for investment that is conducive to investment, and if you identify a very specific industry that you want to excel in, the capital will flow. That is why land lease arrangements were changed, royalty arrangements were changed, taxation arrangements were changed, and government actually itself invested taxpayers' dollars at the beginning in the development of oil sands. It was very much criticized by the public at that point in time. If you ever have a chance to Google search articles of the day, you will find that Premier Lockheed actually wasn't very popular because of the fact that it was perceived that he was getting into the business of business. Well, he made a very strategic, critical decision, and here we are today. We have to make similar decisions with the private sector jointly. But for all this to happen, we need to get to the other side of the platform, and that's social development. We will not diversify or grow our economy if we do not work on the quality of life that we need to create in this province in order to attract and retain the talent and the skill sets that we will need in this province moving forward. If we want to bring immigrants or other migrants to this province, and if we want to make sure that our own kids stay in this province upon graduation, they will demand a certain quality of life. And I learned that actually quite anecdotally while being in the United Kingdom. There was a time when they restructured their healthcare system some 5 years ago, and they had a surplus of family physicians. And their medical association opened up a forum where any jurisdiction could come and recruit these doctors. So we were in this convention-style setting. Alberta was there, every province was represented, many US states, New Zealand, Australia, and these predominantly young doctors were shopping around from one booth to another, asking us questions, interviewing us on the possibility of immigrating to Alberta. And what I found particularly interesting was the fact that after a few dozen of them were rolled through, not one medical doctor asked us, how much are you going to pay me? Or what is the benefit package like? They all intuitively knew that we'll pay them what we have to. If we don't, somebody else will pay them a little more. The questions were, do you have art galleries? Do you have museums? Do you have recreational facilities? Do you have schools? Do you have senior homes? Because I'm bringing my mom and my kids along with me. And the list went on and on. If you were to synthesize all of their questions into one, the question would have been, when I'm working long hours in your province as a medical doctor, will my family be happy living there? And that is the currency right now, where we have the most competitive and most fluid and mobile labor in the history of the planet. It is not dollars, because frankly we don't want to engage in a competition on dollars. We'll lose, and it will render us uncompetitive, relevant to our neighbors and other countries in the world. It is quality of life where we have to compete on. And I know that we can win this race. But we have to be honest. We have been slipping on the front of quality of life. While Albertans have made some very difficult decisions in the 90s where we decided that it is important to pay off our debt and eliminate our deficit, and I'm glad we did, because if we didn't do that, we wouldn't be able to have these discussions right now and imagine what tomorrow would look like in Alberta, because some banking institutions would be making those decisions for us. But the fact is, while we were doing all that, we did slow down and in some cases stop building infrastructure in this province. And as I travel the province right now, that is all I'm hearing about. And it has significant impact on different groups of Albertans in different ways. So if you go to any urban municipality, you will find that the average waiting list right now for a daycare spot is 3 years. So we're in a situation right now where families, couples actually sign up for daycare before they have even conceived, because that's how long it is to get a daycare spot. So that means that we have Albertans who are ready and willing to work that can't go to work because they simply don't have childcare. And I know that some would be tempted to say, well, where's mom or grandma? But the fact is we come from all over the country, we come from all over the world. Not everybody has the luxury of having mom or grandma around to do babysitting. Everywhere I go, there's a shortage of senior care places, and those that exist are not adequate for what we consider to be adequate for our parents. You know, I was in Lloydminster now it will be about 3 weeks ago, and I walked through the hospital, and that community was really proud of itself because they managed to attract all the medical professionals they need to fully operate their hospital. They had general surgeons, obstetricians, and the list went on and on. And as we were walking through this hospital, they started telling me how they shipped most of their patients to Edmonton for surgeries and dialysis and all those services. So I said, well, you just told me that you have all the medical professionals here, why don't you do it here domestically? Well, the answer was we can't because we don't have any recovery beds. So I said, well, why don't you have any recovery beds in your hospital? If you don't do any surgeries, your recovery beds should be empty. Well, no, they're filled with seniors. Seniors who are not sick are occupying hospital beds, not only in Lloydminster, but in every single hospital throughout Alberta. Those are the most expensive beds money can buy, and it's probably the worst type of care you can give to senior because they don't need to be in hospital. They need to be in a seniors facility that provides them with care, entertainment, and everything else that goes along with living in a home, not living in an institution. And we should see those shortages throughout. Neighborhoods sprawling, Calgary, Edmonton, Lloydminster, and then Lethbridge, shortage of schools. We have kids where we don't have schools, we have schools where we don't have kids. And on the economic side of infrastructure, our roads, you know, my wife's family comes from Saskatchewan, and they were telling me that a number of years ago when you drove from Saskatchewan to Alberta, you knew exactly when you entered Alberta because the roads got better. That's no longer the case. We haven't maintained our road infrastructure. Oh, is it still? Well, that means theirs are really bad. Because we're at a point in time right now where the Alberta Motor Transport Association, the association that represents all the large trucking companies right now, are offering to pay 1 extra penny per liter of diesel of extra tax if we commit to use those dollars for refurbishments of our roads, because their wear and tear on trucks and tires and load loss is so high that it actually makes sense for them to make that investment. So if we are to create that economic growth, we need to address those issues, because the next fundamental question that we have to ask ourselves right now is this: are we building a province that we will be proud of 43 years from now when they look back at us? A province in which our kids will want to stay and raise their families and grow our economy? Or are we building a work camp? A place to which people will come, work for 5 years, make a lot of money and leave because they don't want to live over here, because they simply don't enjoy the quality of life over here. If we're going to invest in this province, there is a plan. And you're probably asking yourself, Lukaszuk, how are you going to pay for all that? Well, the answer isn't simple, but there frankly only is one answer. The fact is this: families should not be borrowing money for buying groceries. But families do borrow money to buy homes and cars. Businesses, even if they had money on hand to buy a warehouse or a factory, would not pay cash up front. They would amortize that expenditure over a prolonged period of time, depreciate its value over time, and build that into their balanced operating budget. I firmly believe that not only our province, but frankly any jurisdiction, must have a balanced operating budget. But the fact is that the days of paying for infrastructure cash up front are over. We're growing by approximately 100,000 people every year, which is the city of Red Deer. We need to replicate city of Red Deer every year. But what makes it more difficult is that the population doesn't just grow in one town, it grows throughout the entire province. And no jurisdiction in the world that I know of would have the financial wherewithal to build all that infrastructure, plus catch up to the backlog of infrastructure that hasn't been built and maintained, paying cash up front. Financial advisors, frankly, wouldn't advise us to do so. So we need to take an inventory of the needs, infrastructure needs into this province, and we need to amortize that infrastructure over a number of years. But the fact is this: we have to make a solid commitment to infrastructure for at least 10 years. Because if we want to build this infrastructure, the industry that builds infrastructure must be able to respond to that request.